Hi there. Today I'm going to address the recent headlines. I'm sure you've all seen them. Talking about the magic that real estate will no longer be able to not negotiate their commissions. The 6% commission is dead. House prices will fall and the sky's going to fall in the real estate industry. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to address it and tell you the truth, tell you what's going on, and tell you how it's going to affect you, the buyers and the sellers. Let's start with a little story. I got my start in real estate living in Australia. I'm married to an Australian. I moved to Australia for a number of years. And I got my start in Australia. In Australia, the real estate industry works different than they do here. Over there, we do not have buyer's agents. We only have listing agents. Agents list a house for sale. They have exclusive listing for it. And buyers, if they want to find a house, they go on a portal site like realestate.com.au, which is like a Zillow, redfinhomes.com type thing, etc. The seller pays for advertising on those sites, and people go on those sites, they see the house, they say they want to look at it, they call the listing agent. The listing agent arranges for them to see the house. They go see the house, they want to make an offer on it, they tell the listing agent what kind of offer they want to make. The listing agent verbally agrees to it. Then he'll fill out a boilerplate contract, give the contract to the buyer. The buyer will then go hire a lawyer who will look over the contract and look for gotchas and things like that. The thing about it is that you have to realize that a listing agent's job and his fiduciary responsibility is to the seller. It is not to the buyer. It is strictly to the seller. He has a duty to be honest and forthcoming to everybody he deals with in the public, but he doesn't have to notify buyers that there's things they should do to protect themselves. All he has to do is say, you want to make an offer of this much? And he can't suggest prices or anything like that. All he can say is, this is what we're asking, this is what we expect. Here in the United States, it was a lot like that up until 1990s, early 90s, late 89, or late 80s, early 90s. And they started the MLS system, and with it, there became a rule called cooperative commissions. And the cooperative commissions basically were, when the listing agent took a listing, they agreed to list the house in MLS, and in exchange, they agreed to put a certain amount of the money that they agreed with the seller to pay in commission towards a buyer's agent, so that the buyers, when they saw a house, they could call a real estate agent up and say, hey, go show me this house. The real estate agent show them the house, write a contract, and then part of the commission that the listing agent has taken on the front end from the sellers would get put into the buyer's agent. So the sellers were out any money out of pocket, or the buyers weren't out any money out of pocket, and everybody got paid at escrow and that's closed, and nobody had to worry about who was getting paid and how. Well, all that's changed, as you can tell by the headlines. What happened is that some sellers said, well, it's unfair that part of my commission that I'm paying to the listing agent is going to pay for a buyer's agent who's negotiating against me. Because again, the listing agent or the selling agent, his duty is to the seller. His job is to get the most money and the best conditions he can for his seller. He owes nothing to the buyers. The buyers, he can't talk to the buyers about price and say, hey, well, if you offer this a little bit less, then, maybe you get the house. He can't do that. It's against the rules for him, and he would get sued if he did. So the buyer's agent, who works for the buyer, instead is the one that negotiates the price, sets the conditions, advises the buyers, tells them, hey, this is something you ought to look out for. These are the inspections you ought to have. These are the things you ought to look out for, blah, 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 all the way down the line. And his job is to try and protect the buyer. trying to get the best deal for the buyer that he's working for. He owes nothing to the seller, and it creates a negotiation system between the seller's agent and the buyer's agent to working for their clients in the best interest, somewhere meet in the middle, and everybody ends up happy. That is the way the system's supposed to work. That's the way it's worked since the 90s. But after this lawsuit, and certain sellers said, hey, it's unfair that I'm paying commission to the buyer's agent to negotiate against me to try and get a lower price for them against my agent. I just don't think that's fair. And I disagree with that assessment. And I think the lawsuit was wrong on that basis, because in the end, it's actually the buyer who's bringing all the money. So they're the ones paying all the commission to both sides. But that's neither here nor there. I wasn't a lawyer. I can't handle that. Can't argue it now. Anyhow, NAR lost the lawsuit, and it was several $billion. And so now, to settle the lawsuit, they've come up with an agreement. They're going to pay $400-something million to settle the suit, but they've agreed to change certain aspects of the real estate industry. And one is there will no longer be cooperative commission listed in the MLS. It can still be offered by the seller, but it will no longer be displayed in the MLS. So buyer's agents no longer know how much they will get paid if they write a contract on a house. But also, now, because in the lawsuit and the Department of Justice said that buyers should know how much it's costing to buy a house, because some real estate agents in the past had said, hey, don't worry about it, it's free. Well, it's not free. It's going to cost you. It's baked into the price of the house, so the house costs a little bit more, so it's baked into the price of the house. And you're paying that as the buyer anyway. So it was never free, but you just didn't have to take it out of your pocket. Well, under the new rules, in order for you to see a house, and this is the first time, you can't even call me up anymore and say, hey, Monty, let's go look at the house on such and such street I just saw on Zillow. I'd like to see it. Now you have to come to me, and we have to sign an agreement between each other. And this agreement is called a buyer's broker's agreement. And basically what it says is that I will show you this house. This is how much money I will get paid if you decide to buy this house. It will be a fixed amount, or it can be a percentage of 2%, 2.5%, whatever. And let me address real quick the 6%. 6% was a standard years ago, and hardly anybody's getting 6% anymore. I've never seen 6%. Never got paid a full 3% on a sale yet. But usually it's 2 to 2.5%. I've gotten less and I've gotten more, but I've never gotten the full 3%. Just hadn't happened, not in years. So the whole 6% is just blah. It's just bluff headlines. Anyhow, what happens is that for us to see a house, for me to even show you a house, for any realtor or real estate agent, and this takes effect starting July of this year, if this agreement is signed into law by the judge, which I think it will be, that before you can even ask to see a house, you have to sign an agreement. And on that agreement, you have to agree that if you put a contract on that house, that you have to pay a certain percentage to your real estate agent, or a certain fee to your real estate agent to represent you as the buyer's agent. Now, 90% of the time, this is not going to affect anything, because what's going to happen is sellers are still going to offer a concession. The listing agent is still going to take a listing at 5%, 4.5%, whatever. And then the listing agent will offer part of their listing agreement commission to the buyer's agent, but they can't publicize it. So what happens is we have to write a contract for that house. And in the contract, we have to stipulate that we're asking for whatever you've agreed to on the buyer's broker's agreement with me or your real estate agent. That is what you want in concessions from the seller. in order to execute the contract. The seller either agrees and signs the deal, and then the seller still, just like, and you have no money out of pocket, extra that you didn't have before. It's all baked into the purchase price. Or, again, they can say no, and then you have the choice to either go through with the contract and buy the house. But if you do, then you have to pay your real estate agent out of your pocket up front or at close of the deal. And it can't be financed. So it'd be have to have your savings or whatever. If you decide not to, then the contract can be null and void and never signed, and the whole thing ends right there. So 90% of the time, what's going to happen is we're going to write the contract, we're going to ask for the concession, the seller's going to give the concession, we're going to finish the deal just like it's always done. It's just that we don't know what it's going to be up front, and you have to sign that buyer brokered agreement up front agreeing to pay that amount. Now, the only get you about this is that we cannot change the amount. This is part of the rule that we have to go by. So if we agree to 2.5%, which is what most of us are going to ask for, some of us are going to ask for 3%, but most of us are going to ask for 2.5%. That 2.5% is what's going to be baked into the deal. And if we ask for that 2.5% concession back from the seller to pay me, then if they come back and say, no, I'm only going to give 1.5%, then there's the other 1% that you're going to have to come up out of your pocket. And I can't change that 2.5% and say, oh, well, now I'll just take 1.5%, because it's written into the contract and under the NAR rules, we can't change it. We can't write an open-end contract that say we'll take whatever the seller is offering as a concession either. It has to be written in stone to start out with. At the same time, if the seller comes back and says, sure, I'll give you 3.5%. I still only get paid 2.5%. It's written into the contract. I can't change it. So that other 1%, you can ask for it as a concession on closing costs, things like that, as an addition if you wanted to, or even say, nah, forget it. You don't have to pay that. Maybe you'll sell me the house if we're in a multiple bidding situation type of thing. But yeah, that's the biggie in this whole thing is that we cannot even show you a house, not one house, take you and open the door for you and show you the house without that agreement being in place. So this all starts in July. A lot of us are starting to do the buyer brokers agreements now to go ahead and get it in place, and everybody knows what's happening. That buyer broker agreement can be for one house showing. It can be for multiple house showings. We can list them. We have to list the number of houses and where the houses are and all that good stuff. So if you want to see 5 houses and you give me the addresses and we go list the 5 houses on that contract, after we see those 5 houses and the contract's dead, if you don't put a contract in on any of those houses. If you buy them, of course, that contract lives on forever. But it can also be for a certain period of time. We can make it for a month. We can make it for a week. We can make it for a day. The good thing about it is the contract's cancelable at any time by either one of us with written notice. So if we go see 5 or 6 houses, if we make it for a month and we go see 5 or 6 houses and you decide you don't want to buy a house, at that point, you can say, let's cancel this contract. Let's forget it. I'm not going to buy a house right now. And we can both walk away. That's fine. But anyhow, if you decide to buy a house and it's one of the houses I've shown you along the way, that contract is still void, still workable, and you still owe me a commission for that house, even if you use another real estate agent. It also means you can't switch real estate agents willy-nilly. You can't say, oh, well, you show me 10 houses, but I'm only going to let this guy write the deal on that house. That can't happen anymore. Now it is, you have the house, contract with the house, and I've shown you the house. That's my deal until the end. Let's see, what else do you need to know? If you're a first-time home buyer, if you're a low-income home buyer, trying to get down payment assistance and stuff like this, if you're a VA buyer, this thing's going to affect you the worst because you're the ones that have to sign a contract to agree to pay these commissions, and you don't have the cash in the bank. You can't sign that contract. I'm personally not going to sue anybody over it, but there will be agents that if you sign a contract that says, hey, you owe me 2.5%, and you're a first-time home buyer and you're trying to buy this house, or you're trying to buy a house, I'm not going to hold you to a contract if you can't come up with the money to pay me that extra amount of money, but some will. So if the seller says, I'll give you 1.5%, you owe another 1% to me because the contract said we had 2.5% agreement, some people are going to sue you for it. I don't see a percentage in that, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. If you're a multimillionaire, I might sue you. But if you're a first-time home buyer and you're struggling to get down payment to come together anyway, then I'm not going to go after you. If you're a VA buyer, you're limited by the concessions that you can ask for from the seller by law. So you can only ask for a certain percentage. And some of those concessions are already baked into your VA loan that the seller has to pay already. And so you're capped at amount that you can ask for in concessions, and your VA buyers are screwed more on this deal than anybody else. So it's not a good deal as far as I'm concerned. I'm sorry to say it, guys, but if you're a first-time home buyer, you're a VA buyer, or you're low income and you're trying to buy your first home, you guys are going to struggle because of this new rule and these new laws. And I can't, this Department of Justice and the lawsuit that did all this, and there's no way we can get around it. It's just, they're there. Now, I know this is kind of crazy, and like I say, this doesn't take effect until July. So if any of you are looking to buy a house and you want to do this before July, we can do this without having to sign a broker's buyer agreement up front to start out with. We can see a few houses, and then we can sign it type of thing. But after July, I have no choice. If you want to see a house, we have to do it. We have to do it then. So now's the time to get in on it. If you want to buy a house, now's the time to really jump in. Let's try and get it out of the way before all this new crazy stuff starts happening. I know some of you are going to have some questions about this and you're still not going to understand it. You're going to want to reach out. Hey, I'm available. Call me on the phone. Send me an email. Send me a text message. Ask me to meet you at a coffee shop, or we can come to the office. I'll sit down and explain it all to you as best I understand. I'll show you the fact sheets. I'll show you the law, the way it's laid out in black and white, and the rules I'm going to have to follow, and the way this thing's going to work. I'll try and answer any questions you have. And hopefully I'll explain this to you a little bit better, and hopefully you'll understand it, and we can proceed from there. It is not the end of the world. As I said, 90% of the transactions will still go through like they've always gone through without any problems. It's just that we have to have this form signed up front, and clear communication between us, so you know what I'm getting paid as an agent to represent you. And I'll be glad to lay out why a buyer's agent is important to you. There's 100 different reasons why it's important to you, and the things that could cost you deeply if you don't have proper buyer's representation, especially if you're a first-time or new buyer and you're not really sure about how all this works and all the good stuff. Because without a buyer's agent looking after you, you can really end up getting screwed. So yeah, reach out to me. Let's talk about it. Questions, I know some of you are going to have, and I want to answer them as best I can. Take care, guys.